there's something brewing which some of you are getting involved in, but you don't know. There's a master plan. It's a very dark master plan. And by the time that plan is finally executed, uh, your own relatives will be dead, your family members will be dead, and you too may be dead. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this channel. My name is Augustine Ambe. Let me start the show by saying that what we really do on Esteemed Television is talk about possibilities for Ambazonia. But you really cannot talk about the possibilities for Ambazonia when Ambazonia is still buried in colonial conflict. And this is a colonial conflict that has been going on for over 100 years. First it was the Germans. The British and the French helped chase the Germans out of our land. Then it became the British. There was a more legal process that got the British out, but before they got out, they messed us up very badly and gave us to the French. And right now, the French are the people who have violated every agreement we made with them. And we've decided that it's time for them to leave. And this time, they're not going to be chased out by foreigners, and there's no legal process for them to leave. So Ambazonians have the responsibility to chase them out themselves. And like I said, our show is talking about possibilities. But we have to deal with this enemy in the house first before the possibilities of Ambazonia start coming in, because the possibilities of Ambazonia now are benefited, are usurped by foreigners. Last week, we talked about Moja, and in that show, we kind of talked about what he's trying to do. But the reason La République and the French are down in the dirt like that is because they came in with their military. They thought they would get us in a day or two. Obviously, they did not. I think it taught them a lesson. It also taught us a lesson. It also taught us that, we can actually take care of ourselves. And so they tried that one. It did not happen the way they wanted. And now they're into communal conflicts. They're into creating communal conflicts among us so that they can then stand back and see us kill each other as they did in Rwanda. Except in Rwanda, they ended up not being the victors. They lost Rwanda. In fact, they lost even the French language that they go around trying to promote. So in Ambazonia, we have to be careful. These are people who are experienced in causing communal conflicts, and then half Africans slaughter themselves, and they stand by and watch, along with the world. Just like the world is watching us suffer, whatever they're giving us right now. So in this show, we want to deal more with, after the failure of their military, they have now, like I said, they are right now into communal conflict, and we need to take that very seriously. And part of taking that seriously is to learn about their past, is to see how they engineer these things. And with me on the phone is Terebs Banga Wakai. He spent a lot of time looking at some of these things, and I want to welcome him as part of our show today to help us and clarify the picture a little more. Terence, thanks for joining us on the show.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely, we are glad to have you too. Now, you just heard my introduction, and basically, I really want us to go into the weeds on this whole intercommunal thing that the French have mastered. I think they also tried the same thing in Sierra Leone until the British came in. So I want you, let me lay this, and then you can tell me whether I'm correct or not. In this intercommunal conflict, they normally don't. I mean, like the regular army, they will obviously have their guns. They armed by the French and whoever wants to arm them. But in the intercommunal conflict, they want to really go low tech, meaning that they want to do like what Moja did. And I know that you've done some research on this, and I think the machete, or what we call cutlass, is very important.
Well, I think the machete is a very, very important symbol in this discussion that we're going to have today. Mm-hmm. It is an important symbol because it was the tool of choice of the Interahamwe death squad in the genocide in Rwanda. And as you have alluded to in your introduction, we cannot talk about the tragedy of Rwanda without invoking the role that the French played. As a matter of fact, we do have French military and political officials acknowledging the role and responsibility of France in this genocide. It is indeed a low-tech tactic, as you just mentioned, that is useful in this engineering of this intercommunal violence. And I think one of the things that you also mentioned was those who engineer these things in the background that we must take very, very seriously. And as you have alluded to in your introduction, we cannot talk about the tragedy of Rwanda without invoking the role that the French played. As a matter of fact, we do have French military and political officials acknowledging the role and responsibility of France in this genocide.
I wonder, as you were talking about about that machete, I was thinking, there was a time when La République, and that was not very long, when they wanted to collect machetes from every family, remember?
I do remember, yes.
And that was not very long. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, it wasn't very long ago. I think there was a communique out that they should stop the selling of machetes or something like that in the northwest and southwest regions, as they call it. And there was also a circular which was online. Now I do not know if this was a legitimate news, but it definitely circulated online, where the Ministry of Defense of La République had sent out a recruitment release and asking for recruits to come with machetes. Now we do not know if that was valid, but again, you see the invocation of this very important symbol. And one thing I want to say is that one of the I've read a lot of books regarding what the tragedy in Rwanda. One of the most authoritative writers on that tragedy is one Linda Melvin, and I think we've talked about her in the past. And I don't think it's by any accident that she does have a machete in the cover of one of the books that she authored. Again, seeing that weapon, that tool in the hands of somebody who is obviously working for this French proxy administration in Yaoundé is something that needs to be taken very seriously for its historical role in what happened in Rwanda, what happened in Congo Brazzaville, and obviously what is unfolding in this crisis in Ambazonia.
Yeah, you know, when you mentioned about asking for recruits to come with machetes, it becomes, the picture becomes a little clearer in my eyes. It seems, or in my mind, it seems to me that they are trying to disarm the population of their own machetes or prevent them from buying machetes. Meanwhile, they want to arm their military or the communal people they are recruiting with machetes. Do you see what I'm talking about?
No, it's very clear. It's very clear. Again, it's a very powerful symbol. Let me give you a statistic regarding the use of machetes in the Rwandan genocide.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this was revealed in A People Betrayed. That's another book written by Linda Melvern.
Mm-hmm.
And she writes that the machetes came from China, supplied between 1992 and 1994 by a company called Oriental Machinery. The invoices are filed under the heading Eligible Imports. According to bank records, USA 6.4 million was spent on agricultural equipment in 1993 by Rwandan companies not usually concerned with agricultural tools. A significant importer of machetes was Felicien Kabuga, a relation of Habyarimana. Habyarimana, for those who do not know, was the president of Rwanda at the time of this conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Whose wealth came from coffee exports and the import of household goods and clothes. Invoices show that most commercial concerns in 1993 imported machetes. A total of US $275,669 was spent on 581,000 machetes. One machete for every third adult Hutu male. So in the lead up to the genocide, the government of Rwanda imported over 500,000 machetes, and this was the tool of choice for the death squads, the Interahamwe, and so on.
So basically, you're saying they had machetes for every able-bodied male.
Well, this is what the quote says, that there was one machete for every third adult Hutu male. So that's a verbatim.
Okay, well that reduces the number, but that's a lot of machetes.
Yes, that's a lot of machetes. And when we see an individual parading around with a machete, with blood on his body, threatening members of a particular community, this is what it invokes for me, and it takes me back to this conflict in Rwanda. It takes me back to the presence of the French in the lead up to the conflict. It takes me back to the justification for their support of the genocidaires. It takes me back to their financing of some of these imports.
Who financed it? Do you have information on who financed it?
Well, I know at the time when the conflict started, Rwanda was under a structural adjustment program.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that a structural adjustment program does is that it liberalizes import and export transactions,
Mm-hmm.
So actually, because that's one of the, they come in, they want to open their economy, they want to make it easier for countries, especially third world countries, to have open markets to import and export stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that actually facilitated the import of some of these arms. I think between 1990 and 1992-93, as reported by Linda Melvern, Rwanda was third only to Nigeria and Angola as importers of arms in Africa.
Are you kidding?
So that is so that's a huge amount of arms. So there was definitely something in the works, and Crédit Lyonnais, which is a French bank, has been cited as one of those who financed some of these arms deal, especially arms still relating to the government of Egypt.
I want to narrow it back to the machete because we need to stay on this for a little bit because if you look at, and I want to stay on this a little bit because there's one of our audience who kind of tried to minimize the story on the story of Moja parading the streets of Boya with a machete in his hands, and he was saying, "Oh, you can't take one person with a machete and then you generalize the population." And I want to let our population know, and you can add on this, please. I want to let our population know that if you look at the what Terence just said about a communique coming asking recruits to bring cutlasses or machetes, if you also remember the ban on machetes, and I remember a lot of people were making fun of that on social media. So these people are fixated on machetes. Don't forget that the leaders of the genocidaires who left Rwanda, they were in La République du Cameroun and for over 10 years. So this is not a joke. So if you think that, look, I don't want to call this man Moja because I think he has his name and he's written his album or something. If you think that he's a joke or that he's a one-man show, no. He met with John Gute. So there is a bigger plan, and I think what Terence is quoting dates, and I'm writing some of them, it shows that the Rwandan genocide was planned for a long time. I think from the earliest that I see here, Terence, is 1990. So this was planned for a very long time, and people just kept watching, and we shouldn't let it go now. I think fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And if there's anything we're doing on this show, it's alerting our people that there is a communal, there's a plan to set your own brother against you, your own another family against yours, neighbor to neighbor, and then let us kill each other, and they stand aside and look. And they do that because they know they'll get away with it. They got away with it in Rwanda. Terence, if you had anything to add to that, please do.
No, and I think that is why it's important to highlight this symbol. The machete represents a symbol. It represents a symptom as well. Because once you start seeing the symptoms, that's how you begin to diagnose the disease and possible outcomes if it's not attended to. So this gentleman may not know what he was doing parading around with that machete, but those on whose behalf he's doing it definitely know what they're doing. And I think when we talk about early warning signs in conflicts in Africa, this is one of them. It was there in Rwanda with the imports of 500,000 machetes and the volume of arms that was coming into the country in the years leading up to the genocide. Nobody took it seriously. There were cables from Western embassies in Rwanda as early as 1991 talking about an état-major, a staff of colonels and above within the Rwandan army that was preparing for what they themselves call the final solution to exterminate the Tutsis. So this was all information that was available as early warning signs, and nobody really paid attention to it. We can speculate, given the role that France has admitted playing in the current crisis in Ambazonia. They have admitted playing that they are protecting Biya from significant Western pressure. And that's why, as you mentioned in one of your pieces, he has had such a latitude to do what he has done to the Ambazonian people over the last 4 years. And we begin to see as the military operations are failing, the invocation of this intercommunal violence, the projection of this symbol of the machete in the hands of individuals who, it seems to me, are ready to hack people to death if we believe their rhetoric.
No, you have to believe it because our last show did show Cameroun as a partner with France in engineering what happened in Rwanda. So they're a natural pair who have a lot of experience doing this kind of stuff. Now,
well, let us be careful a little bit. I think, I mean, there's definitely there was the introduction of Jacques Roger Bobo as the Secretary General Special Representative to Rwanda. Boutros Ghali. He was a Cameroonian who was obviously former minister of the Cameroon government. So as reported by those who've done investigations on these things, he was part of the Cameroon elite, and a close friend to Boutros Ghali, So he was introduced in Rwanda, and his presence there was not welcomed by all sides in the conflict. Even observers were not part of that conflict because they did not find him to be neutral. Another thing which is really interesting about Boutros Ghali was that we've talked about importation of arms from Egypt. Egypt had a policy, and I do not know why, not to sell arms to Rwanda. One can guess that policy was as a result of the totalitarian nature of that government and their historic persecution of the Tutsi population, right? So they had a policy of not selling arms to the Rwandan government. Even after meetings between both presidents, an arms deal was never transacted. But however, in 1990, when Boutros Ghali was the Egyptian foreign minister, he interceded and convinced the Egyptian defense ministry to start selling arms to the Rwandan government, right?
Yes.
And he admitted that, yes, he was a catalyst in making that process happen after everything had happened. And I mean, there's some speculation if the Egyptian president was aware of that transaction, but at the intercession of Boutros Ghali, the Egyptians started selling arms to the Hutu government in Rwanda, and then a year later, Boutros Ghali becomes the Secretary General. The Secretary General of the United Nations. He has these close relationships with the Hutu government officials in Rwanda. He sends in Bobo down there. The mission that Bobo was supposed to lead, completely collapses. The genocide ensues, and members of some of the brain trust of the genocide find themselves in Cameroon. Now that implicates Cameroon because reporting on their presence in Cameroon indicated that they were being protected by the Cameroon government, right?
Yes.
So we may not go as far as saying that Cameroon was involved with France, but we do know that there's that relationship after the genocide in hosting a lot of these Rwandan officials who were part of that government.
Terence, I do not understand why you're cautioning me. In fact, some of the people who were involved in that Rwandan genocide, as it was the French, it was obviously Cameroon. Not only you did not. I think you should repeat that. Jacques Roger Bobo was a friend to the Secretary General.
What I am saying is that...
Let me finish. I just want to make sure that I want to connect some of the dots. Because when I say it is the same partners that caused the genocide in Rwanda that are still there today, I don't know if you're trying to challenge that. Because the French were involved. Cameroon obviously was very heavily involved. Don't forget that it was President Paul Biya who kept them in Cameroon for 10 years before releasing them under pressure. He kept them from 1994 until 2005 that they were finally released. So I don't know why you want to argue that these are people who have a very long history with using machetes. The same people are involved in Ambazonia right now. And let me add another thing here. You know, I was reading a report, and I'm going to read that. I'm going to read what I captured from that report about the. Let me just
before you read that. Before you read that, I must intercede. Okay.
Okay.
I am not disputing anything you've just said. I'm not disputing. Obviously, it's a matter of record, of public record, that Bobo was there as a UN special representative. His connections with Cameroon, the fact that Cameroon provided safe haven to all of these guys, and that's what I'm not disputing that at all. You know, I think we all agree on that. What the statement you made that I want us that I'm cautioning you about was in the lead up to the genocide. I have not come across any reporting that indicates that Cameroon was involved in the lead up and during the genocide, right? So that's what I wanted to make clear to our listeners, right? That from what I've read, from what I've consumed as over the course of time, I've not come across any report that cites Cameroon. Now, right, after Bobo was appointed, and what happens after that? There's no disputing their involvement along with France and the Rwanda elite.
And that's what I'm talking about. That's all I'm talking about.
Yes, I thought you said, what I thought I heard was that, we're all part of this, So I want us to be fair and to say in the run-up to it, I've not come across any record that puts Cameroon as being a participant. But post-genocide, starting with the appointment of a Cameroonese former foreign minister, his conduct leading up to the genocide, the failure of the mission that he was heading, right, as a special representative, and then obviously these people being settled in Cameroon and being protected and only being released after due pressure from the international community. Definitely you bring in Cameroon there. And then, one of the reasons we're talking about this thing is obviously going back again to the symbol of a machete, which was part of this process, So, those connections are there, but I just want us to be clear at what point in my mind that these people that Yaoundé become involved in this story.
All right, I like your caution, but I want to let you know that the regime that is in Cameroon now is the same regime that got to power through a genocide in Cameroon itself. The French were involved. They talked about Rwanda. And yes, we know the level at which it came out, which is public. And don't forget that when Paul Biya kept these people in Cameroon for over 10 years, they had international arrest warrants on them. And these were the ringleaders. So I don't know. So one of the things that we have to start doing now, because the Ambazonian people have always given the benefit of doubt to foreigners. And those foreigners have never treated them even one time right. The Germans did not treat the people of Ambazonia right. They were the first colonial masters. And we know how our people fought them. We know how many they killed to take over the place. The British came in. The British were nicer, but then they came in a different way. But the British definitely left Ambazonia a better place. The Germans also left Ambazonia a better place because they dug some of the roads. But this regime that we have now has been the worst regime that ever, this colonial master now is the worst colonial master that ever visited Ambazonia. The worst. Like Dr. Monzo says, let me just finish this. Like Dr. Monzo says, they never added 1 kilometer of road since coming in. Do you remember him saying that? Isn't that remarkable that for half a century they haven't added 1 kilometer of roads? We've played video of our people crying with their investment in vehicle getting tumbled on the roads. These are things that governments have to do. So this is a colonial master that has done a lot of damage, and they do it by killing. And so I feel comfortable saying that the mastermind of the genocide in La République du Cameroun was done by the French and this regime right now. They were part of the brain trust, or they supplied the personnel. Terrorists know that Jacques Rojabubu could not have gone to Rwanda unless the Cameroon government said, that's the man we sent. You know, another thing, as I'm talking about this, I'm also thinking, remember that when in the crisis in Ivory Coast, it was another Cameroonian who was there as a UN representative. Do you see something going on here? Trusted partners?
Yes. Again, there is no disagreement on that.
Those are just facts. I'm just describing. I'm not accusing. I'm just describing what the picture shows.
Yeah. Again, there's no disagreement on that, but I just wanted the chronology of events to be represented accurately as far as I know.
It is represented. Now, let me read a piece here, because we've talked about Cameroon and their involvement in Rwanda and what they're doing in our territory. But there is a mastermind on this, and that is the French. I want to read a little bit here. It's something I just read. In fact, this was published today by the Concord. It says, over the past 10 months, the French ambassador to Cameroon, Christophe Guillaume, has met Paul Biya frequently with orders from the Élysée Palace. France has made no secret of its longing for political stability in Cameroon, despite the current government economic incompetence and human rights atrocities. A source inside Cameroon's presidency that elected anonymity opined that France has insisted Biya opens negotiations with the breakaway Federal Republic of Ambazonian leaders in detention. But the progress is painfully slow and embarrassing, and the French are extremely disappointed that Cameroon is sliding into another Sudan. So I remember in one of our shows, you pointed out very clearly and very accurately with public information that this French ambassador visited Boya in the southwest, so-called southwest, and look at what is happening there. Immediately he left. We see Moja. I don't know if you took note of Moja's machete. It's a brand new machete. So there is something cooking here, and we should not be giving the benefit of doubt to any other person, but keep it and assume the worst for the people of Ambazonia.
For sure, the current French ambassador in Cameroon is almost like an activist, a very activist ambassador. He parades all over the place. He receives a guard of honor from the military that has spent the last 4 years killing infants and babies, burning villages, killing civilians. His presence was noticed in the so-called southwest regions, and soon after he left the southwest regions, after meeting with the governor and the security officials, we saw the thing in Kumba, and then obviously following the heels of Kumba, we now see the display of the machete in public. So yes, we are making an accusation I am making an accusation that the French, through the ambassador, is an active participant in trying to gin up intercommunal violence in another African country, not unlike the way they did it in Rwanda leading up to the genocide. That's an accusation one must make, given the history of the French in Africa, and particularly this symbol that has been injected into the psyche of our people, this symbol of the machete in the hands of an individual who is blood-soaked and who is being given plaudits by the Prime Minister of Cameroon Republic.
Yes, and so looking at what you just said about the French ambassador, I find it a little contradictory that this reporter here is saying that the French are having problems with Paul Biya. No, the French are having exactly what they want. I think for them it's more. I think for them it's more a management problem and how to create deniability. I think that's more what's going on. It's not. I don't think they have any issues in doing anything or making things happen in Cameroon.
Well, as I've just mentioned, all of the early warning signs are there, and that is why we must continue highlighting the role that France has been playing in this conflict in Africa, for the past 75 years or so. I think other embassies that are based in Yaoundé, other institutions in the world can no longer deny these obvious early warning signals, and I think it's about high time that something is done about it. And France needs to be brought to book. They got away with one in Rwanda. They got away with one in Congo Brazzaville in the Pool region. They got away with one in Côte d'Ivoire. As a matter of fact, in Côte d'Ivoire, they were supported wholly by the entire Western partners. But it is incumbent upon us to draw these parallels, to highlight these symbols and these symptoms of death that has come to life over the last few weeks.
Well, I'm gonna step outside of Ambazonia a little bit and ask you this. Africa as a continent, with its continental organization AU, did witness what happened in Rwanda and how many Africans died. Do they have a responsibility to protect Africa or Africans?
Yes, theoretically they do, but as a matter of fact, they've not shown any indication that they are prepared to do that.
With that said, this is really a dumb one that I'm going to ask you. Now that we are alerting the Ambazonian people about a pending genocide, and when I say pending, this intercommunal thing is not a joke, because if you look at what the soldiers of La Republique were doing in Womb, they go into communities and they pit one community against another, and look at and it's shown on this video.
Yes, why do you vex? Qu'est-ce qui vous énerve? What happening? Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
In Womb, in the northwest region, the military manipulates the Muslim community, provides them with protection, stage video and all, to go and murder the non-Muslim population as they stand by and watch.
Ça c'est le courrier de la communauté Bororo qui ont décidé en découdre avec les Zamba Boys. Ils sont insaisissables. Insaisissables. Nous avons fait ce que nous avons pu faire, mais là ils se dispersent dans toute la ville, mettent le feu, brûlent, cassent. Voilà. Ce qui nous reste à faire maintenant, c'est aider les blessés, les brûlés, que nous conduisons à l'hôpital. Nous sauvons ce que nous pouvons sauver. Voilà la situation actuelle. On essaye vraiment de faire ce que nous pouvons faire pour nous interposer à cette action-là. Vous avez vu, c'est pas évident. Ils sont dans tous les états avec des machettes et des gourdins. Donc voilà, ils sont comme ça, c'est des dizaines de groupes dans toute la ville.
They were pitting the Bororo community against the larger Womb people. They guarded them, allowed them, and protected them, and they went and burned homes and burned people in those homes. In fact, there are videos of people walking on the street with their bodies all second and third degree burns. The same thing in Gabu. They went and brought the same Fulani people to come and partner with them. where else did they partner with? Did they do such a thing? I think so. They've been going around doing these things, and so if we're not very well alert now, I don't know when we'll be alerted again, because the picture is becoming very clear.
Yes, as I said, it's incumbent upon us to take this information and analyze it in its proper context, right? And let our people know, the Ambazonian people, and those who are interested in this crisis in other parts of the world, in their advocacy, they must highlight these early warning signs. And these are not early warning signs which are brand new. They're a repetition of what happened in Rwanda. I really want to cite something regarding this because I'm all about this symbol of the machete.
Yes.
Because for me it is a very it is very raw when I saw that, and when I saw that, I immediately went back to the cover of that book I've told you about, Linda Mervin's book, the Rwandan genocide, which has a machete as the image on the cover,
Who is Linda Mervin again? Can you?
She's a reporter, an investigative reporter. I think she's British, So she's written she's one of the more authoritative voices on about the conflict in Rwanda. So she's written a bunch of books about what happened, the events leading up to it, and a lot of the information I've gotten about the conflict is through Linda Melvin, amongst others. I've read quite a handful of books, more than a handful of books regarding this conflict. So I really want to read one of a passage from her book, because when we were talking about the visceral reaction I got when I saw a machete in the hand of this guy, targeting a specific community of people. And as if that was not enough, this very individual was seen in the presence of the Prime Minister. And so this is what Linda Melvin writes in one of the books that I have. The title of the book is called People Betrayed, The Role of the West in Rwanda's Genocide.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very short piece, and it says we're talking about a Belgian officer who had been informed that the Belgian government will be withdrawing its troop after the Hutu military had gone in and killed 10 Belgian peacekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to read it real quick. Le Maire asked a bookmeister to assemble the crowd and stood on a chair to explain to the people that while the UN flag flew over the school, they were safe, but that would not last. The politicians in Brussels were withdrawing the soldiers. Le Maire advised them to disperse, to slip away under the cover of darkness. Several people approached him later and asked if, in the event of a pullout, he would shoot them first, telling him that a bullet was preferable to being cut into pieces with a machete. Let me repeat that last sentence, please. Several people approached him later and asked if, in the event of a pullout, he would shoot them first, telling him that a bullet was preferable to being cut to pieces with a machete. Okay, so this is what the machete represented to the victims of that tragedy in Rwanda, even before they became victims. So you have people are asking UN peacekeepers to kill them with bullets rather than for them to be hacked to death with a machete. So what this tells us is that symbol needs to be taken extremely seriously, and I'm glad you've paid some attention to it, and I'm glad I have an opportunity to talk about it some more.
Yes,
to warn our people, to warn those who are interested in seeing in avoiding another tragedy on the continent.
Yes,
and to let people that that guy may have friends, may have relatives, those around him they should tell him that that thing he's holding in its hand has a very dark history with the people that govern that country, that he serves as a B soldier.
And it's a symbol which La Republique is paying way more attention to it than any government should. No government should be interested in its citizens owning machetes. The machete is a farming tool in Africa. It's a tool to produce fuel to cook your food. It's a very important tool. So when a government that owns tanks and helicopter gunships start paying attention to machetes that are owned by its citizens, and is encouraging recruits to come and it's talk about machetes, and somebody parading the streets supporting them is already holding a machete, know that they are paying a lot of attention to it and they know what they're going to do with it.
Limited time. Come no go, una go. Enough is enough. Inshallah. I need shame. I need fear. I say una start go. Come no go, una start go. I don't go announce for Bukwango, for Bonakanda, for Moliko, for my 14. Say, una start back. Una add the expire today for 9 o'clock. Amumezam. The wait una for my 17. Una go in peace. Man no can second time. As I tell una, second time no day. And now, any Bakere man will keep their man.
Terence, I want you to address another thing. There's another book which this one is written by a Frenchman, and I want to reference this because I want you to talk about that. Then I want to bring its relevance into what is going on in our territory, because what is going on in Ambazonia and what the French, the Cameroon government, and foreign partners are repeating are exactly what happened in Rwanda. There is a story about a French writer who also wrote a book talking about after he heard. I want you to tell that story where he read a transcript talking about genocide on both sides, please.
Well, the name of the French writer is I may not get the last name correctly, but I'm gonna read the full name and then I'll refer to him by his first name only, which is easier to pronounce. The name of the writer is Patrick de Saint-Exupéry. The book he wrote is called L'Inavouable, La France au Rwanda. He had covered the Rwanda tragedy as a reporter for Le Figaro, which is a French paper. And the reason why he wrote this particular book, as he states, is that this was about close to 10 years after the genocide. He was in Moscow, reporting from Moscow. And one day he was, one of those cold winter in Moscow. He was listening to the radio and he heard the then foreign minister of France, Dominique de Villepin, made a statement and talked about les génocides. Not le, but les génocides. So a genocide with an S. Obviously implying that there were two genocides in Rwanda. Obviously the one committed by the Hutu, the allies of France, that the French themselves have acknowledged that they have some responsibility for. And then the narrative they were trying to elevate was that the Tutsis also carried out a genocide against the Hutu as they defeated them, So he was, because he had covered the tragedy in Rwanda and understood the role that the French government had played, he was incensed by this attempt to change the narrative and start talking about two genocides instead of what the world knows as the genocide carried out by the Hutu-dominated government. He had also mentioned in this book that it wasn't the first time that he had noticed that the French were trying to introduce this narrative of two genocides, you know. So basically, so at the end of the day, what the French were trying to do were trying to equate their responsibility in the genocide of the Hutus to the responsibility of quote-unquote the Anglo-Saxons that they felt were sympathetic to the RPF and the RPF. There's one point before I continue on this thread, there's one point we really need to make regarding the RPF. The executive committee of the RPF had more Hutu members than Tutsi members. Right? Mm-hmm. So that's just, so I want to have that background. Because the government in Kigali was a totalitarian government, and Hutus who were not buying into the Hutu power philosophy were also targeted. So you had a lot of Hutus who were in exile, who were part of the political opposition as well, So going back to Patrick's book, he had said that in, I think, November of 1994, so that's just a few months after the genocide had taken place, there was one of these France-Afrique summits in France. At that time, Mitterrand was still the president. Mitterrand was heavily involved. I'm sure you remember his quote, that in places like this, the genocide is not important.
Yes, in places like, let me just repeat it, in places like Africa, genocide is not important. So you can cause genocides and get away with.
Yes. So he said in that conference, I think it took place in November of 1994, François Mitterrand had given a speech, and obviously he could not avoid addressing what was then the news of the day in Rwanda being part of the Francophonie and all of that stuff, this France-Africa summit. And he talked about the genocide in Rwanda. But what happened was that when, usually when they make these speeches, there is a written transcript of the speeches that is given to reporters, Mm-hmm. So when he got his copy of the written transcript of the speech that Mitterrand had just given, where he talked about the Rwandan genocide, there was an S after genocide. And so when they went to the press conference, he asked Mitterrand, what do you mean by genocide? You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So ultimately, the reason he wrote the book was because he had noticed that it seems as if there was a concerted effort within French officialdom to rewrite history.
Thank you for that background. I think this information, most of what we've been talking about, goes to explain the methodology that the French are taking in Cameroon right now. So before any of that takes place, you see, they've already collected all the machetes from our people. They've stopped machetes being sold to our people, so that when the intercommunal war starts, only their own people will have machetes. So that's part of it. But the reason why I wanted you to talk about this French writer and him talking about two genocides is because, if you noticed, on November 30, 2017, it was La République that declared war on us, sent battalions of troops to go and burn villages, to go and kill at will, kill babies, kill old people, put over 60,000 into refugee camps in Nigeria, dispersed about 1 million hanging around in bushes and in La République du Cameroun, being robbed every day. And somehow they are able to convince the international community to be talking about violence on both sides. Can you believe that? Is it not the same as genocides on both sides?
Yes, the same narrative, and it's very unfortunate that some people repeat that. This reminds me of when Michel Bachelet went to Cameroon. I think it was May of last year, and came out with this, what I would consider a very dishonest, communique, where he talked about how, and what she did in her communique was basically isolate what she called the separatists and put all of the blame on them. I have part of the communique which I'll read. She talks about welcoming Cameroon's willingness to cooperate to tackle human rights crisis. So he calls it a human rights crisis. She calls it a human rights crisis. So right there and then, she's undermining the gravity of the situation, right? Trying to set the stage to create this moral equivalency, right? This is what she offered in that her press release, that to provide advice and assistance to the government, similar to that being provided to the G5 forces in the Sahel, to help ensure that military operations are in compliance with international human rights standards and violations are prevented when military forces are engaged in counter-terrorism operations and combat against armed groups. So that's the way she's phrasing what is happening in Cameroon, okay? And then she goes, further to state the following. The High Commissioner said that she utterly condemned the targeting of civilians by all armed groups, as well as the torching of schools and medical facilities by separatist groups in the Northwest and Southwest province. So you have a state party that is engaged in a war against what they consider a segment of their population, right? They have all the machinery of the state, the military, the police, in the case of Cameroon, gendarmerie, intelligence, the backing of France, they've explicitly stated that, and the UN High Commissioner goes and talks about all armed groups, So yes, this is part of that narrative that they are trying to create this moral equivalency, not unlike what François Mitterrand and Dominique de Villepin, when they started talking about two genocides. But we are trying to highlight these early warning signs that we've talked about in the beginning, so that people like Michelle Bachelet will have no place to hide if the outcome in Ambazonia is more tragic than it already is, And those who are promoting this idea of a moral equivalency between a state that decided to attack another state, claiming to be part of its territory, and farmers, Okada drivers, and others who decided to defend themselves. So it's very important that we bring this out in the manner in which you've elicited me to bring it out.
Well, I'm very happy you took the time to help people understand what they're facing. They're facing a world that some members of that world have said Africa needs to be kept underdeveloped and impoverished.
Sub-Saharan Africa has been fundamental to the global prosperity of the advanced countries. Okay? And Africa had a role to play. It has a role as a raw material producer. We will not allow Sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep Sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap.
And so any villain who comes out with an agenda to destroy his own people and recruit very ignorant male... the reason I'm saying ignorant is because I was looking at the thing where La République is trying to recruit more soldiers, and the qualification to be a soldier is first school living certificate, And these are people that you can, first of all, they're poor, they're destitute. And so you can now, instead of helping these people, you take and put arms in their hands, they go and get killed, or they kill their own. And so it helps that international conspiracy to keep Africa underpopulated and impoverished, so that they should be producing raw material for the rest of the world. It's expanding this, but it's expanding what we're talking about when I start mentioning this. But if you look at it, it is part of a white supremacist treatment of Africa that nobody really cares to listen to the story. Nobody pays. You have to care enough to actually find out what's going on. If you don't care enough, you wouldn't even care to find out what's going on. You would just say, oh, are you the chief? Yeah, so you need a gun to take control of your people? Absolutely. And then they give Paul Biya, and Paul Biya writes a script for Michelle Bachelet, and she goes and reads it. And that's why this thing has continued with no... an international crime is being committed in Ambazonia, and there's no international community to listen to. But if it was happening where the French want something to be done, like in Ivory Coast, where there was a legitimate government put in place and re-elected by the people, and they refused to take a look at the evidence that Gbagbo was putting up, and they invited the French, invited the Nigerians, brought in the UN and all the pounds on this little African country, and kicked out their hero. So you see how all of these things are really coming together. Terence, I want to ask you this, and I think I've asked you this question before. I don't think you have an answer to it, but I just want to. It seems to me that there needs to be more morality, and that the world is growing past some of these draconian analysis and decisions that are made. Do you think, because like I keep saying, since last summer, I think the death of George Floyd has definitely changed attitudes in America, if only on the surface. But I go into very responsible offices, government offices, corporate offices, I see Black Lives Matter. And what that means is that, and I want to say that these corporations are actually putting money behind when they say that. They're actually changing policy. You think the international community will start expanding the meaning of Black lives, including African lives, matter, and therefore the UN and its human rights organizations and the corporate involvement in Africa would start being a little more rational and reasonable in its treatment of Africans, and not just the establishment, that makes the environment prepare for them to harvest whatever they want.
Yes, I think that is bound to happen. But if we want to accelerate that process, we have to be, very, very insistent. We have to be very defiant in the pursuit of our humanity. It took the slaves 400 years to dismantle that economic system that was dependent on free Negro or African labor to propel wealth for others. As you stated, they want to maintain that system, especially on the continent, to keep it impoverished, as has been recently stated out explicitly. But what I want to add to this is that it wasn't too long ago that, and I think I've mentioned this before, that, the African American had the right to vote in 1965. So it took them that long. But still, this country and this world needed a Black Lives Matter movement, as you stated. Black Lives Matter came about when there was a black president as president of the United States. So having a black person doesn't change the institutional setup, the systemic problems about racism and so on. To take it further, though, I want to say that there is no nation, there's no state in the history of the world, in my opinion, that has enjoyed white supremacy and white privilege more than France. And starting from when they were kicked out of Haiti, and they forced the Haitians to pay them for being decolonized. France could not have done that without the solidarity of the Western world. And the legacy of that solidarity in white supremacy and white privilege is still telling on the Haitian people. We saw that in Africa with the establishment of this slave currency called the CFA franc. We saw that in one particular case with the killing of Olympio in Togo when he tried to disengage himself from this process. We've seen that over the years with the crimes that they've gotten away with the Rwandan genocide, with their involvement in the Pool region of the Congo-Brazzaville, with their involvement in Cote d'Ivoire, with their involvement in Libya, which was unfortunately backed by NATO and the entire Western system. They have successfully been able to play the role of the white supremacist and the privileges of being white and European to get away with murder. This is something that we really, really need to bring to the light in our advocacy efforts all around the world, and especially in the United States of America. I don't think any Ambazonian or any American of Ambazonian origin should not go into any office to any stakeholder without being able to explain what the French have done to Africa. The systems they continue to have in place, such as the CFA franc, such as military bases, such as their involvement in genocide and massacres, going back to the 60s in Cameroun, in Algeria, in Madagascar, and all of these other places. They have done it with impunity, and at some point it has to stop. Yes, Black Lives Matter, and those blacks also are Africans.
It doesn't mean to say that there's nothing Africans can do. Of course there is. Okay? But this is the opposition that they're fighting. This is what it's about. Because if Africa does do something different, I assure you living standards of all those in Europe and North America and Asia is going to fall. Okay? And that is a big price to pay. I assure you that the West is not going to allow that without a big fight.
It took 100 days with machetes, hacking people. 800,000 is a conservative number. Some have put it to 1 million and even above. Can you imagine how many people were falling every second? And the world sat looking for 100 days.
Well, there was absolute solidarity as far as the West was concerned. There was absolute institutional solidarity. I think Anthony Lake, he was the national security advisor at the time under Clinton. Yeah, he basically said that, we don't care what happened there.
Meanwhile, Clinton himself was struggling not to use the word genocide.
Yes. So, one of the things that we really need to be aware of is that at the end of the day, right, French diplomacy is very effective, right? And that effectiveness has nothing to do with morality, right? It's just effective. And they have found a way to achieve their goals no matter what, especially in Africa and only in Africa. Right? And that's why I say that there's no other nation in the history of the world that has benefited from these concepts of white supremacy and white privilege more than France. And I think they understand that.
So Cameroon is not a country. It is a French state. The French manage everything, not only through their communal. Like we said, and Terence have emphasized that, right now the place is being run by the French ambassador. And so all these killings the killing of babies, the burning of sick and old people in their homes, it's all micromanaged and engineered by the French. The whole point about this show, Ambazonians, is to alert you that there's something brewing which some of you are getting involved in, but you don't know. There's a master plan. It's a very dark master plan. And by the time that plan is finally executed, your own relatives will be dead, your family members will be dead, and you too may be dead. You know, Terence, the other day when I was looking at Moja, I was thinking that this guy does not know that immediately he's done all these things, and if he collects enough information, they will whack him. He's not going to live, because you're dealing with people who, they're just looking at you like a tool. And the moment you stop being a useful tool, they throw you out. And if you go and listen to Moja trying to apologize for what he revealed, a lot of what the prime minister, who himself is being used to murder his own people, told him that you're doing a good job. Doing a good job doing what? Doing a good job pitting the people of so-called Southwest against the people of so-called Northwest? Is that a good job? You're doing a good job saying that within a week you're going to declare a war against Bamenda people? You're doing a good job carrying a machete on the street? You're doing a good job in a thing where you call a country, you go and stand and tell people in their homes that they should pack and leave, and that there's an amoument waiting for them in mile 17? That's a good job? But you're working for the enemy, and that enemy is there to kill your own people, and you may not survive yourself. So, Ambazonians, watch out. What happened in 2017 on October 1 when we declared our independence and all of us rejoiced, that was where we need to go back and continue our fight, because nobody's going to come and give us a break. I think we've been doing this for over a century, thinking that there's a savior coming somewhere. There is no savior. We need to regroup and continue the fight until we own ourselves as God gave us ourselves. Anything else you want to add, Terence?
I'm glad with the work that you've done throughout this very odd year. I want you to continue doing that work of informing, to empower our people, not only our people, but others who are interested in our story. I think you provide a full breadth of analysis, and it is very helpful for your audience. Thank you.
Well, I want to, obviously you've been a partner in that journey. Roger has been a partner, and all the other people who have contributed to our informing our people. And information is key. Once we stretch the mind, it will never unstretch. And I just want Ambazonians to know the power of their resistance. La Republique thought they can come in a week and show us a gun and we'll all roll. We haven't rolled till today. They are the ones rolling. They are the ones who have found their guns dead, and they're going back to a machete. You are winning, Ambazonia.